Hi, I'm Thomas the Hermit, and I am a lay hermit, a man of prayer, about 35 years, and I'm also a commentator on things that are happening within the Catholic Church. But today I am talking about prayer, and that prayer that I'm talking about has to do with the series that I made or am making, which is Teresa of Avila, the Great Teacher of Prayer. Now, this topic is on the humility of Teresa of Avila. Now, you may not think that that's important, but number one, humility is extremely hard to define. Number two, it's important in the contemplative life, is paramount. Without humility, you cannot advance onto the way of perfection. And Teresa of Avila, you'll hear in the quotes that I'm going to give you, is adamant about this point. That if you want to advance in contemplative, mystical, contemplative prayer, you are going to have to lay a foundation of humility. Okay? Well, now this first quote that I'm going to give you, all of these are either from The Interior Castle, The Way of Perfection, or The Life of Teresa of Jesus. For otherwise, what security can there be in a life as misspent as mine? And do not let it depress you to realize I am like that. I have sometimes seen you depressed when I've told you so. The reason that it affects you in that way is that you would like to think I had been holy. That is quite right of you. I should like to think so myself. But what can I do about it when I've lost so much through my own fault? I love this particular quote. That is quite right of you that you should think that I am holy. I should like to think so myself. But what can I do about it when I've lost so much through my own fault? Now here we hear in the saint's own words her identification with her own shortcomings and failings on her journey towards prayer. It is very interesting for the great teacher of prayer to also be the one who was the great neglecter of prayer. My soul was so distracted by many vanities that I was ashamed to draw near unto God. Did you hear that? This holy woman of prayer, the great teacher of prayer, said that there was a time when she was ashamed to draw near unto God. In an act of such special friendships, that of prayer, as my sins multiplied, I began to lose the pleasure and comfort I had in virtuous things. And that loss contributed to the abandonment of prayer. So when she says in the previous quote, but what can I do about it when I've lost so much through my own fault? She's identifying a truth. This great woman of prayer at one time stopped praying. After she had experienced the supernatural prayer of quiet, she slips back and kind of is avoiding God because she thinks that she has begun to believe that she's not good enough to be doing this. And this was a temptation of false humility that the devil had raised up in her. Now I'm going to go a little bit farther. The next quote is even more telling. The reason why they thought I was not so wicked, this is continuing the same story about her saying that she was a nun, but she was not actually entering into that gift of prayer God had given to her. And so she goes on to describe how bad that was. They saw that I withdrew myself so often into solitude for prayer, read much, spoke of God, that I liked to have his image painted in many places, to have any any oratory of my own and furnish it with objects of devotion, that I spoke ill of no one, etc., etc., which I have the appearance of virtue, yet all the while I was so vain. I knew how to procure respect for myself by doing those things which in the world are usually regarded with respect. So Teresa of Avila is confessing to the fact that she put on a big show. You know, I know within the church that we have lots of people putting on big shows, and that's what they are. That's all they are, is shows. Okay, so Teresa is painting this picture about how she fell into this temptation of false humility and neglected her prayers. So when she says to her sisters, "But what can I do about it when I've lost so much through my own fault?" She's telling the truth. But she is able to acknowledge that truth. She's able to identify with her own shortcomings, her failings, and her sins. She is honest with herself. She is real. And all throughout her works, she is constantly trying to bring that point home. She's like begging people, don't think so much about me. I'm a weak human being. And many times she says, I'm a weak woman. Now, I'm not getting into the feminism thing because she grew up in a particular age, you know. And even though she said things like she was a weak woman, she was also a very assertive woman. So don't get the idea that she was kowtowing down to everything that men told her, because she rejected bad spiritual advice from her confessors. And she also asserted her own spiritual theology. That's why we study her. She has her own spiritual theology, and it is so excellent that everyone wants to learn from her. So no, I do not think that Teresa of Avila lacked self-image. But when people read her works, they begin to think that she does, because she calls herself stupid and ignorant, and she says, you know, what I've already quoted, you know, oh, I'm only a woman, you know, I'm not compared to men of learning, all different things like that. But she is not attacking the human self. She is attacking the reality of the spiritual. And the thing, remember the thing that I showed you that she said about self-knowledge? That peer upon the greatness of God, and then you will see how much you are lacking. Okay? So Teresa of Avila is trying to teach us to have humility. She has humility, of course. You know, she's a canonized saint. All saints have humility, and they have great humility. But we mistakenly think that, oh, look at the great humility. Yes, they have great humility, but because they have looked at themselves in the light of God's greatness, and because of that, they have discovered humility. Let me read this one. This is really, really good. This is furthering the thing about humility, and this is in the third mansion of the interior castle. Oh, humility, humility. I do not know why I have this temptation, but whenever I hear people making so much of their times of aridity, I cannot help thinking that they are somewhat lacking in it. Now she's getting down to the brass tacks. See, in my walk, I identify somewhat with this. In my walk, I encounter humiliation on a daily basis. Okay? When you are a homeless person, you will experience humiliation on a daily basis because you are not treated as an equal human being to others. Okay? But I'm not trying to make so much of my own humility. Teresa is the one who is the great person of virtue. But what I'm trying to say is that the degree of humility that we think we need for the spiritual journey is not the degree we really need. The humiliation and the humility that one needs to climb the heights of contemplative prayer are are beyond what we think is healthy psychology. So if you're in the business of constantly trying to defend yourself or protect your self-esteem or things like that, you're not going to be able to do this, because we need to go way beyond. God is going to take us farther than we ever thought we could go. Let me quote this last one for you to make my point. This is from Teresa in the Fifth Mansion. I like the way in which some souls, when they are at prayer, think that for God's sake they would be glad if they would be humbled and put to open shame, and then try to conceal quite a slight failure. Oh, and if they should be accused of anything that they have not done, God save us from listening to them. You know, we've heard similar counsels from St. Francis about humility. You know, this thing about being accused when you're not guilty of something but remaining silent, boy, Teresa puts heavy stock upon this, okay? And she also says that if someone thinks that they're going to pray for humility, and then when God sends them humiliations, oh my goodness, how they get it. What does she say exactly? Oh, and if they should be accused of anything that they have done, God save us from listening to them. You see, humility is that important for the contemplative life. And as you journey towards God, He will allow sometimes very deeply humiliating circumstances to happen to you. But that's God working, trying to bring to you great humility.